Hello and welcome to the WS podcast, formerly known as Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today, and before we begin, may I just remind you, if you find this podcast entertaining, useful, in any shape, way or form, informative, and enhancing your life and understanding of of the world maybe, or you just find it curious enough to pay attention to, please make sure to follow or subscribe depending on the platform you're on. It allows the podcast to grow. It helps me to see whether or not what I'm doing is resonant with you. And ultimately, if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, please follow the link below, and don't forget to share it with a friend or your family member, or just post it somewhere. It helps loads. It makes my heart grow fonder, and it definitely enhances my experience of this audible endeavor. So I deeply appreciate your time and your attention. That's ultimately what we're doing here, right? I'm giving you my time and attention, and you're giving me yours. So I sounds like a good deal, to be honest. Welcome everyone. If this is the first time you're tuning in, you might not see the difference. If this is not your first time, then you might be seeing on the screen that, and you might actually hear it in my voice as well, that some things changed around here. I've basically, apart from rebranding, about which the last episode hopefully was a good introduction, I've also created a slightly different studio. It's still the same space. It's just slightly changed. I'm experimenting, so this might not be the final, the final outcome. I'll be sort of tuning in and out. I'll also see how this episode works out. I'm trying out new equipment. I've invested some time and money into making the studio slightly different, I hope better. So here we are. Let's see. The adventure continues. It's basically just a milestone, I guess. The rebranding is done, hopefully also for your benefit. I hope it's basically easier for people to find the podcast, and it's easier for me to share it with others. I know that as much as I loved my previous podcast name, as we've discussed, it was not easy to find, and it was not easy Googleable. What a word, Googleable. So I thought, why don't we try something new? So here we are. The studio seems the same, slightly different maybe. I've still decided to keep the majority of the books that I would like you to explore behind me, so I hope that they are visible enough for you to appreciate and maybe get inspired by, and get them for yourself. So welcome. Quite an exciting little thing. It's a milestone for sure. And funnily enough, as well, today is the April Fool's Day as I'm recording this, which is exactly a week prior to when you will be listening to it. And my side thought is just straight away, it's like, I'm really surprised how little people, at least around me in Scotland, seem to care about April Fool's Day. I'm pretty sure I managed to convince my workmates of a joke that I will let them off the hook of tomorrow. So if anything, I'm torturing them with anticipation, sort of suggesting that I'll have to be deported, kind of vibe. So big shout out to my team. Hopefully they're not too stressed about me. Funnily enough, I just mentioned to them that I'm on a call with my father about this, and there's so much trouble about it, while I'm sitting down with a coffee to start and record the first episode of this new studio. So that's just jokes on you guys, I guess. But it's a nice little tradition, April Fool's Day. Hopefully you've had a chance to celebrate in your space already a week ago. So here we are. I am aware that I'm basically 1 week or 2 weeks, depending on when I decide to record it, from the episode, which basically will be the milestone of 200th episode, which, yet again, another big thing. It seems like they all stack up at the same time. And Easter's coming around. There's so many things happening in my life. So I thought I'll give you some another special episode prior to that anniversary episode. And then we'll go back to our usual rhythm. And I will also share today some of the ideas and assets, hopefully, that I'll be sharing with you into the future to make your experience and the value that you get from this show even greater, hopefully. And the episode itself is all about values. So I thought it's a good moment for it, especially with rebranding done and slightly touching on the subject with Trenton as we were discussing it last week in the episode. I thought, what's better than exploring this topic further? And since we've already touched on it so many times from different avenues, I've decided I'll share some quotes here and I'll kind of just freestyle a little bit. I have some notes, but not many. This is one of those episodes where I kind of feel like I just wanted to share with you some things and basically, hopefully, inspire you to review your own value structures and value ladders or value pyramids or value lists, depending on what you consider your values to take form of. So my biggest question for you to maybe begin this adventure with is what is your highest value? What do you value the most? And straight away, an easy way to answer this, to be a sort of a smart ass, I guess, would be to say, well, I value my life, right? That's the most basic and also the most animalistic, but also, I guess, real, down-to-earth answer one can say. Of course, this is not exactly what I'm asking you about when I'm asking what is your highest value, but it's a fair point. We cannot really benefit from exploring all of these concepts and appreciate their depth and even have the chance to discover it if we were dead. Of course, assuming that we are alive, and who are we to know otherwise? Maybe we're all just dreaming of being alive. Anyhow, if we put that aside, my question to you, what is your highest value, or what do you value the most, is a very informing question, because the answer, I believe, that you will give me or give yourself reveals a lot about your approach, attitude, and perspective to and on life, So maybe a good way to follow up with would be, what do you think the purpose of your life is? Or maybe what makes your life meaningful? These are also two big questions that I would definitely encourage you to explore. And later in the episode, as I share with you the invitation for the week, I'll probably reiterate some of these. And finally, maybe slightly easier, but also yet again revealing, and all of these questions seem to be, to me, quite interlinked, is this idea of the question, what drives you? What makes you tick, right? Why do you get up in the morning? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And yet again, as smart as there, maybe someone who doesn't really appreciate these types of conversations could simply just say that they are getting up because they need to go to work, or they get up out of bed because it would be not beneficial for them to stay in bed too long. And straight away, these answers, as as maybe smarty pants vibe as they may be, they are very, very revealing in terms of what actually drives you and what is your value. Because ultimately, if you value getting out of bed because you need to make money and so you go to work, and that's why you would answer the question saying, my reason for getting out of bed is to go to work, is, well, that means you must value to some degree the ability and the idea of earning money, right? And this is a great question into which we'll delve deeper today as well. Why do we value that so much, right? Like, if you think about it, you could just lie under a tree for your whole life, and if that's not anyone's particular tree, you might not be bothered at all, and so you could sleep in, supposedly, and yet you don't do it, right? So there must be some value structures in your life, even if you're not aware of them consciously, or you've not really paid attention or thought about them that much yet, that are driving your behavior, right? And that are driving your life. So before we go back into these and dive even deeper, I have one more question for you. And this one in particular really shook me. And I actually have it written above my desk in my home, which basically is, who are you when no one is watching? Or an iteration of that is, who are you uninterrupted, right? So who are you when no one can see you do what you do? And who are you when no one can bother you? No one can interrupt you with your activities. Both of these seem to me to be hitting quite close to one another, although of course, one is more relevant to activities that you supposedly do on your own, and the other supposedly could apply to anything and everything, right? Because no one has to be watching you for you to do a good deed for another. No one has to be watching you, paying attention to you closely for you to help someone else, and so forth. The whole point of these questions, though, is to ask yourself, in essence, what makes you you, and why and how, if in any way, do you act differently when someone is paying attention, when someone is watching? So, the straight away what you might think about is the idea of hypocrisy, right? Someone on one hand saying that they do something, or they are, somehow, they are some way, and yet when no one's paying attention to them, when they are at home on their own, they do exactly the opposite, or they simply don't follow up on their supposed words that they've, thrown onto the wind, as they say. In Polish, we have this saying that you should not, throw your word on the wind, and I guess it's very similar in many other languages, right? The idea that basically you should be the man of your word, or at least don't say things lightly, don't claim that you are somehow or some way unless you are. And that's when integrity comes in, right? So my question for you here, who are you when no one's watching, or who are you uninterrupted, is to make you start thinking about these concepts when you are alone, right? Because right now you might be sitting on the bus, you might be listening to this as you are at the gym, maybe you're actually chilling at home already, maybe you're with someone, maybe you're alone. And I would argue that it's in those moments in our free time when we are not responsible for any other people, when we are not pushed to do any work, or when we're not at the job, at our workplace, when the magic happens. And I'll elaborate on that straight away, right? So I truly do believe that I will be able to say much more, to tell much more, and to get to know you much more, or say much more about you, if I observe you in your home after the day of work, than when you're at work, or when you're somewhere in a public space, or doing something that supposedly other people could pay attention to, or you're doing it with other people. And this is not to diminish these places and these activities, right? Like, it's a fair game that when you are at your job, you are doing a diligent work, and you are quote unquote the man of your word or the woman of your word. That's completely fine. That's great. You know, that's in and of itself is a great approach and quality to have. The thing is, though, unless I will be able to observe you in your spare time, I will be really hard to be pressed about your nature and about your values outside of these structures that the society has built for us, right? Because, as we've said earlier, if you do value going to work, probably and simply out of necessity, let's be honest, it's not like we all every day work simply because we love to work. There is an underlying need for us to make money, to pay for a living, because we live in the world that demands of us to pay for things, unless we want to completely abandon civilization and, as I said earlier, lie down under a tree. But it's unlikely that many of us will choose that route. But that doesn't necessarily mean you are living with your values and purpose, sort of drawn on your sleeve in a way. It's not obvious, it's not transparent what do you value, simply because you adhere to some norms and, structures that have been put in place for you to do so. In a way, we are coerced, which, maybe it's not the nicest thing to think about, but in many ways, we are coerced to act in a society in a way that fits that society. If you go to work to pay for your life within a given group, within a given society, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would want to do that if you had other options. Now, free time and the time you spend outside of your work, outside of those responsible, required spaces and actions, now that's where and when this discourse of what do you value, who are you uninterrupted, who are you when no one's watching, I think really hits home for me, right? So, as I said, this is not to say that there is no value at all in going to work. 100% there is. But my question to you is, what do you do after work? What do you do in your free time? Or what do you do in those days, maybe weekends, maybe holidays, when you don't have to go somewhere, when it's up to you what you have to or have not to do? So, I'll give you on my sort of example, just so you can maybe relate or not. Because I value self-development in whatever way you would like to express it, because I value myself into the future, and I do believe that by making myself smarter, stronger, healthier today, I will benefit from it going forward, because I value, my future ultimately, because I invest in it. One of the activities that I do basically every day is reading. Another might be, working out or going for some sort of an activity, exercising in some way, shape or form. And similarly, exercising the mind by learning something new, learning a language, for example, as we've discussed before. My question to you is, what do you do in your spare time, right? Because, and this is something I've talked about so many times already, but I'm really sorry. This is one of the bigger parts of this podcast, right? I'm trying to get people to hopefully become wiser, better, stronger, more well-rounded, whatever, or just empower you, really inspire maybe. Here the thing is, I do really believe if you allow yourself to simply consume, to, in your spare time, to simply either drink alcohol or binge watch Netflix all the time or scroll through TikTok, Instagram, whatever, basically, stare at consume some materials of others rather than even think for a moment about yourself or take care of your body, or maybe if you're just binging on really, really unhealthy foods, I do believe that in a way you are self-sabotaging yourself, and you're taking away the most important thing that you have in your life, which is time. And considering there is not much free time these days, since we have so much work time necessary of us, at least the average, average Joe like myself, likely like yourself as well, there's not many people in the grander scheme of things that can allow themselves to fully, play all day and I don't know, drink at the beach and not care at all about any activities whatsoever to sustain them financially, even in as minimum maybe. Then we are in those moments of binge watching or binge scrolling, on binge drinking, binge eating, we are ultimately wasting our time doing some things that are not necessarily that fulfilling. And you might push back now, right? You might say, oh, but this is completely my choice. I do value my Netflix time. I do value my scrolling time. You don't know what you're saying, Wojtek, just kind of piss off. And that's completely fair. I mean, I would argue with you whether or not that's necessarily truly what you would consciously choose if you knew you're making a choice. But there will be a group of people that will just dismiss this, right? And to be honest, I don't think they will be the ones that are listening to this podcast to begin with, because also I do believe that there is a certain level of curiosity and proactiveness one has to take to start listening to podcasts rather than maybe binge watching Netflix. This is certainly less entertaining in the contemporary, flashy and loud and vulgar way as contemporary media are. A podcast ultimately is a one-way conversation, or maybe a conversation with someone else, with an interviewee that you as the audience are tuning into, right? So I understand, and I'm not trying to compete here for your attention with the screaming Hollywood or some contemporary binge-worthy activities. But since you are already here, you might be inclined to agree that there is a certain benefit to be had from participating in activities that basically, I guess, inspire us, empower us, make our life more meaningful. And these activities don't have to be selfish, and neither they have to be, solo activities, right? When I asked what is your highest value or what drives you, a very firm and straightforward answer would be my family. Maybe the love of my life, or the love of adventure with my girlfriend or boyfriend, or stuff like that. So all of these things, the value is associated based on your perspective, right? We give things value. It's not like they are inherently valuable or not, and maybe that's the good moment to go into that. But ultimately, we are choosing those, and rightly so, right? Like, I mean, if there is one thing that every one of us, in my opinion, should be able to do, as long as we are free, and that's like the basis of it all, is for us to be able to choose what we want to pay attention to, what we want to give our time to, and what we want to do ultimately, right? And in a way, I would argue that attention equals value in many forms. So for example, right now, because you're listening to my monologue, I guess, this exploration of the idea of value, you are giving me your attention, right? And this means that you are valuing this activity of giving me your attention, of listening in, more than a plethora of other activities you might be doing right now instead of listening in to this podcast, right? In a similar manner, if you are with someone at a restaurant And we've talked about this before, right? If you are with someone at a restaurant and they are paying attention to you, you can truly feel it, right? They listen to what you have to say. Maybe they react to it. Maybe they say something back. Maybe they just nod in agreement or allow you space to express yourself fully. It's a very different, in a way, that's the moment when they give you the attention, so they value your expression, your time, your words. In the same way, if they were, for example, typing on their phone at the same time, that's probably gonna signal to you that they don't necessarily pay you much attention, and also that they don't necessarily value your expression, your words, your attention for them, right? And this is a really, really, really important thing I wanted to note here. In the same way as I would encourage you to consider what is it you value, you should observe yourself and those around you to see whether or not those around you value you and whether or not you value those around you. And I understand this might be slightly troublesome because, you might have been a friend of someone for years and you don't really want to allow that friendship to disappear. But if it is the case that whenever you're meeting with them, you don't actually feel like you're being valued, you're kind of being used. Maybe they vent and then they let you go and go to do something else, or maybe they don't really pay attention to what you have to say and they're kind of just like talking at you. Whatever that is, the moment you don't feel valuable, the moment you don't feel like someone else is valuing you, that's a big signal, that's a big red flag, I would argue, in relation to your relationship with them, right? And similarly, if you find yourself not really paying attention and not really valuing what the other person has to say, I would argue that it's a red flag for yourself, whether, for you to check yourself, right? To really think, why are you there? Why are you with them? And what are you doing, right? Because maybe you should just be more disciplined and put away that phone, as we've discussed many times. But maybe, just maybe, this is simply not the person for you, and you are not benefiting from this engagement, from this activity, from this relationship. Maybe you're doing it because someone else told you to value it, even though it's not exactly yours, right? And so this is this space of conscious versus subconscious value structures that we have, right? Like, some things you are coerced into doing. For example, you have no choice when you're an adolescent. You go to school simply because everyone else goes to school, and there is a requirement for you to be, in many countries it's different, but for example in Poland there is a requirement that you will be attending some sort of a school up until when you turn, I think, 16. Past that point, of course, you're you can choose what you want to do. In the same way, there is a certain level of coercion for you to go to work, simply because if you don't go to work, you might find yourself in a predicament where you no longer can pay for your needs, and you are basically in trouble at that point. But there are many spaces and many things in your life that you might be doing, many activities you might be engaging in, and many relationships that you might be having that you've not consciously made the choice of doing them, of choosing them, of valuing them, and yet maybe because someone suggested you to do it, maybe your parents told you to, maybe you've just grown a habit of doing it, that are ultimately an expression of value. And this is a quote, I don't remember exactly, I think it's from Brené Brown, but don't quote me on this, check it out. The idea was that all action is an expression of value. So you can actually infer someone's value structure or someone's priority, someone's attitude based off of what they've done or what they're doing or what they want to do. So for example, if you decide right now to go to the gym, and you're just about to leave out the door, and instead of going to the gym, you might want to play computer games, but you decide to go to the gym. from that activity, that decision, I can already infer that you value your health or potentially value some sort of growth in the area of, exercise, physical exercise, because you're doing it, right? If you are cleaning your room, that means there is a certain value that you associate with your room being cleaned. And yet again, if someone made you clean your room, that doesn't necessarily mean that you value cleaning the room itself, but maybe someone asked you to clean your room, and because you value their perspective and their opinion of you and your room, you will clean your room, right? So yet again, you can sort of go more and more deeper or higher, depending on how you conceptualize it, into this form of what do you value, right? What is it that drives you? What is it that you value? What your attention, what your action really says about you, right? So in a way, the way I sort of conceptualize this value structure, or values in general, is this idea that, if you had a map or if you had a compass that you would use to maybe choose where to go next, I would argue that this compass or this map could be perceived as your value structure, right? So you might be valuing a certain level of financial freedom, and this is why you do certain investments and you basically pursue the route towards passive income, towards the space where you no longer are restrained by your financial needs and financial earnings, because one of the values that you perceive to be one of the top ones is financial freedom. Maybe you value your health and your physicality, maybe you value feeling athletic and strong, and because of that you have a certain set of habits that you partake in, right? Like you probably take care of your diet quite strictly, or to a reasonable level, healthily. Probably you do some sort of workout or engage in some physical exercise, and you're likely to, over time, as you see those results, drive these activities even forward, and you're likely to be an athletic person after some time. It's, in a way, it's like a it's this maybe a northern star or many northern stars that you have in your life that are ultimately over time allowing you to make more and more skillful, decisive and informed choices. So one thing that I've noted here in that regard is this idea that it's much easier to say no to things, to experiences, to people, when you know what's most important for you, right? We've made an episode before about priorities. I'll try to find and link below which it was, but basically, this idea that based off of what you value, based off of what you think to be your priority, you will likely choose the way you spend your time. For me, this shifted greatly when I stopped drinking alcohol, basically a year ago. I did drink a couple of times here and there, but very insignificant amounts, and sort of more like a celebratory, way, but in a symbolical way. I think that's a good way to put it. But this shifted for me greatly, right? So, in UK in particular, but I think around the world it's fairly similar, unless there is no drinking in your country. And there is this, sort of tradition, culture, whatever, habit of going out to a pub to drink, right? Or meeting up with friends and drink. Well, the moment you stop drinking, this kind of stops being so attractive, right? Like, I don't get me wrong, I will attend the pub every now and then with my friends simply to just be with them. But I've noticed that ever since I stopped drinking alcohol on a regular basis, or to be honest, in general, these activities stopped being as attractive for me, and I found more and more reasons and other alternatives basically that allowed me, or push me to decide otherwise. So I'm much less inclined these days to go to a pub just on a regular Friday with my friends from work than I would have done so a few years prior. And in a way, this yet again informs a certain value structure, right? Since I don't prioritize going to the pub anymore, maybe I prioritize going to the gym instead. You will more likely find me at the gym on Friday night than in a pub. Similarly, I found that ever since I have a girlfriend, and a serious one, all kinds of party activities sort of faded a little bit in terms of their attractiveness. Yet again, a big part, let's be honest here, a big part of going out to a club or, attending a house party or of some sort is obviously to meet new people and potentially to mingle with them, potentially to meet someone to date, etc., right? I certainly see that in my workmates on a regular basis and their excitement about it. And I understand it, but since I no longer value these activities, I no longer need them, I have a different priority, I am much less likely to be there, right? Or I am much less likely to even consider that to be an activity of my choice. I might just end up recording another episode on a Saturday night when everyone's out and partying. So, coming back to these values or priorities, as you can see, from your action, you can infer what they are. And this is maybe a good insight for you if you still don't know after, exploring this concept for a while. If you still don't know what your values are, you can definitely, to a certain degree, infer what you value, what your values are right now from your actions, right? So this might be a sort of a cold bucket of water over your mind or your soul or your heart, whatever you want to consider, to realize that what you value is not necessarily what you would want to tell me you value, So maybe if we were to do an activity of writing down what you do in your free time over a span of a week, if we see there together that the majority of your free time is spent partying and, scrolling Instagram, that suggests some sort of value structure. And then, maybe you would want to say that you value your health and value, personal growth and writing, for example. But since neither writing nor physical activity other than partying really made its way to your weekly schedule, I would argue that you're not really there, right? It's aspirational. It's a good informing factor. It's a great start. That's what I'm trying to say. But it's not necessarily your reality, right? Similarly, if you want to say that you value honesty and transparency, yet if you truly think about it, you've been lying to your friends, colleagues, partners, and you're not really too honest about what you do or how you act with others, yet again, it's kind of like this is where you would like to be and this is where you are, right? This is not to put you down in any way. This is a great information tool, I think, and it's a great start of a conversation, an internal one, or with someone else, I guess. But the point here is that by inferring from the action, you can already tell what you value, right? And so over time, you can also check yourself against the values that you've selected. So for example, I guess, it fits the bill to speak about the podcast here. I was thinking, what are the 3 values of this show that I'm producing here in my spare time. And what I've decided is curiosity, transparency, and consistency, right? So consistency, I do perceive to be one of the highest values that I have in my own life in general, because I just see the results. I have this really, really great saying. I don't know who said it, but I have it written everywhere. It's like consistency beats talent every day. And I truly believe that over time, this compound interest effect really pays off. So consistency, for example, in the form of a podcast would be that there is a consistent structure of a weekly or bi-weekly episode that comes out. Transparency, I like to say exactly what's happening on the podcast. I feel like the more true I am when I'm on this, space with you, the more likely I am to feel okay about it, and the more likely I am to attract people that resonate with me rather than those that don't, right? Like if I were making a show here that is nothing like what I am in real life, I would be risking attracting people that are basically not necessarily the kind of people I would like to share my space with. And third is curiosity. And of course, this is a huge part, because the whole idea of the podcast is to find more wisdom to grow as a person for myself and hopefully for my listeners. And also because I'm curious about the world. And so I'm reading those books and I'm sharing with you some of their ideas. And in a way, as I'm going through it, I'm definitely becoming more and more informed and more curious about the world as we go forward. So I guess over time, if you do choose some of your qualities, some of your values that you would sort of aspire to, I guess, you can then later on explore whether or not you are hitting that mark, right? I can check myself in a few months or years' time whether I stuck to these values, whether I was consistent, whether I was transparent and honest and acted in integrity with myself, and whether I was really, emulating this approach of curiosity. So I would encourage you straight away here, and this is the invitation for the episode for sure, is like, think about your values and maybe choose 5 personal values or 3 or even just 1. What do you value? Why do you do what you do? Or, in relationships with others, or in your career, in your free time, in your hobby, what do you value, right? What drives you in many ways? And talking about that, an important thing about this, I think, especially when it comes to friendship and choosing your family feuds that you will engage in or not, or choosing people that you will make your relationship with, or maybe start a family, choosing your company or your career, I think it's really important to know what you value, because ultimately, in many ways, you should share those values with those around you, right? Like, I do believe it's much easier for a healthy relationship to grow if there is at least a few values, fundamental ones for that matter, that we share. Because it will be very, very difficult for you over a longer span of time to find understanding and appreciation with those around you that are maybe in complete contrast, or they barely manage to hit some sort of an understanding with you. And this is not about becoming a part of an echo chamber. There is a huge value for sure in different approaches, different opinions, but there are some values that allow, in my opinion, a good relationship, for example, to grow, right? So from my perspective, being honest and transparent in your relationship, from my experience at least, is one of those things that really, really bear fruits, right? Because if we can fully communicate what we think and then just deal with the consequences in understanding that the one of the highest values in our relationship is truth and honesty, I think we're much less likely to hurt each other and drive the relationship to extinction, right? Because I would argue that it's much more valuable to know where you stand and face the trouble together than lie and deceive and pretend, only to discover that there is this huge monster we've been hiding underneath the carpet for so long now, it's too big to be slayed. And so I would urge you yet again to recognize, once you've thought about your values, to recognize whether or not the values of those around you and of your company, maybe the values of the culture that you're surrounded with, whether it's some activities that you do or, teams of people that you're engaging in, whether they resonate with you, because it will be a much more beneficial and much more fruitful, I guess, relationship and situation if they do feel close to your heart and resonating with. And of course, within reasonable difference, but a big part of it, I think, is finding those that appreciate you and finding those that align some of their values with you, especially the fundamental ones, right? You wouldn't want to be the only honest person in the room full of liars, I think. I know I wouldn't. So yeah, one additional bonus thing that I'll share with you is something that we've sort of touched on when we talked about money in the monologue, Let's Talk About Money, and also in the episode about the Bitcoin Standard book, which is very beloved by many of you. So I appreciate that. I think it's a great book, and definitely give it a read if you can. Is this idea of money, right? Money. What is money? And there is a whole show, What is Money show by Robert Breedlove, which, brings this idea to your attention. And I would definitely recommend to check it out. I'll actually put the link below for both the show of Robert Breedlove as well as the 2 episodes, right, of this show. Money, I guess a good way to maybe conceptualize it the way I conceptualize it is like an energy transfer. This vehicle, this tool that allows us to transfer the energy that we've exerted with our time, attention, and work into the future. So I can get paid from my employer and then use that payment, that cash, for example, and hopefully in the future pay for my own things, and so transfer that energy forward for someone else to use, right? Because obviously, as I'm paying a plumber to fix my my pipes at home, they will then get that energy and they can pay their bill at their own home. So of course, value, right? It's about value. What do you value? And this is a huge, I think, a huge discourse right now, especially that not many people understand inflation. And I would urge you to jump into those topics to actually explore that further. But what I wanted to say here is, depending on your behavior with your money, that is a great indicator of what you value. So if you are spending a majority of your paycheck to satisfy your immediate needs and gratify yourself now, maybe by overspending, maxing out your credit card and potentially buying some things that you don't really need, and you don't save anything for the future, you don't invest any of your money, what that tells me as a bystander on the side is that you value your immediate gratification. Basically you value the present more than you value the future, because you are discounting the future by not keeping any of that money for the future, right? And as I said, this is not as easy as just saving, because there is a whole inflation trouble that will basically eat away at your savings. So please dive deeper into this topic if you want. This is not the part of this episode. But the major point that I wanted to make here is a good indicator of you, for you to decide what are your values, what do you value, is observe what you spend your money on. Because if you see, right, there is no point in getting me into this equation. If you see that the majority of your expenses are for things that you don't really need, that are maybe just a pleasantries, a hedonistic pleasures of some sort, immediate gratification, and you don't save anything for the future, or maybe because of all these things, you don't have enough money to pay for more important things, such as, I don't know, going to the gym, or buying a book, or, paying for some medicine. That's a big indicator of what do you value, right? You basically are valuing your pleasure and fun more than you value your future a few years or decades down the line, or maybe your health, right? In the same way, if you spend time at the gym, you're probably valuing your health more than someone who's spending their time on the couch watching Netflix. They value the entertainment more than they value their physical health. So yeah, just wanted to touch on this, right? So let's summarize, I guess. As you ask yourself, what are your values? What is your highest value? Who are you when no one's watching? And basically, what is the purpose of your life, more or less? Because you can sort of infer the structure of your approaches to life from this. Use, your approach. Basically, figure out what your actions tell about you, where you put your time, where you put your attention. Remember that attention might or may just be exactly equaled with value. So if you value someone, you're probably paying attention to them. If you're paying attention to them or to something, that's probably of value to you. And similarly, if you want to shortcut these self-awareness exercises, you can explore what do you spend your money on, because based off of that, you can also infer what do you value, right? Because supposedly, even if you're doing it subconsciously, you are spending money on things that you do consider to be of some value. Otherwise, you wouldn't give your energy value into those things, especially if you've hard earned it during many hours at work. So it's a very informative sort of activity to do. And this is my challenge for you for this week. Figure out what are your values, right? You can make one, you can make 5. My personal values are above my desk, there's 5 of them. And for the needs of this podcast, I've created 3 that resonate with the podcast, right? So whatever that is, figure them out, and maybe based off of them, you can figure out as well what drives your progress and what do you think the purpose of your life is. And these are very deep and quite fun, I think, an insightful conversation to be had with your own self. Now, just before we wrap up, I wanted to share with you as well a few ideas and sort of in the upcoming months or years, what's going to happen. So I've decided that I'll start making dedicated seasons for books. So, for example, we will have a 10 episode season of fiction books that I think you might be interested in exploring. One of which will be the whole the whole 3-part saga of The Lord of the Rings. Then we will have a series of books dedicated to business and entrepreneurship. We will definitely have a series of books dedicated to geopolitics and history in general, because I've seen that many of you are interested in this, in particular with the episode The Next 100 Years. And there'll definitely be a series of books of spirituality and philosophy, of course, because that's the backbone of this show. Other than that, I also wanted to share with you, and I'll keep you updated on this. I've been working on this idea of creating with the link below, where you have all the other sort of additions to this show, a reading list for you. So initially there will be the books that we've already explored, and over time, as it grows and as I have more time and attention to put into there, I'm hoping to make that list longer for you with many more books that I've already read, but maybe I'm not gonna explore simply because for whatever reason they don't fit the bill. So yeah, this is inspired by Jordan Peterson's reading list from his website. I think that's very, very useful, and I was talking with my girlfriend that this might actually be a fun addition for you. If you ever are looking for something to read, you might just click the link below and find it there. So I'll keep you updated. It's not there just yet. I'm just sort of giving you a taster. Please let me know what you think, right? And you can also suggest something else. This is a big moment of podcast refurbishment, so I'm very open to take any constructive criticism and run with it, or get informed by it. So yeah. Other than that, as per usual, thank you so much for your attention. This hopefully was of value to you, since you gave me your valuable time. Invaluable, really, because time is all we had. And if you found this interesting, please follow, subscribe. This helps the show, and it definitely makes this a more valuable experience for me. And have a wonderful, wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.